Take your CJ7 all the way to 11. Jeepin' with cool guy.
Alright, in today's episode, we're going to put this into that. Yes, it's a white box. No, actually it's a little bit more interesting than that. Let me unwrap this real quick. HEI Distributor. What that stands for, high energy ignition. These things are pretty much awesome. The reason I say that is because what it does is it gives you the opportunity to take the coil, all of the wiring that goes with it, the old distributor itself, and set it up to where you get a much stronger kick off of your ignition. Your engine runs better, and then you can get rid of so much wiring on the inside of your engine. But bygones. HEI Distributor, this is what we're going to install. They say it's a one-wire hookup. Okay, that sounds great, but I think that there's probably a lot more to it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take you step-by-step process through how to install this sucker into this engine. Let me preface that real quick with, this is for an inline 6 258 AMC engine on a CJ7. There's various things out there that discuss the HEI Distributor with this camshaft gear tearing up the camshaft in certain types of models. I've only heard that on the V8s. So since this is an inline 6, I'm not overly concerned about that. But if there is concerns on your part, leave some comments in regards to what your concerns are, and I hopefully will be able to respond to you and send you out to some information resources that could help quell that concern. So let's do this. Let's install an HEI. Let's get going. Okay, to start with, bulkhead, firewall, fuse box, backside of the fuse box. This is the wiring harness that goes out and spreads all over the engine in front of the Jeep. Right side over here, this is your light, front headlight wire harness. This not only controls the horn, but the headlights, the parking lights, the fender indicator signal lights. There's also an orange line that runs out of this that goes up to the grill that you can plug a fog light set into. And then there's also the power for the one-to-washer tank motor. Left side is your main engine wiring harness. There's two main lines that come out of this that provide the energy to the starter and the alternator and so on. This one right here is the main feed line. This one down here, which actually was originally light blue, runs down into the computer. Sorry, not computer, ignition control module, ICM. This is what it looks like. This is housed on the fender right underneath the water tank, the radiator overflow tank. If your Jeep doesn't have the radiator overflow tank, then this is going to be sitting mounted right on the actual inside line of the fender. It's got two connectors on it. One runs to the computer, and the other one runs to the alternator, or the distributor. The distributor, I believe, is this one, the red and white. The computer is when they start talking about the computer bypass and so on. Here's your purple, here's your orange. Anyways, bygones. This connector right here could actually be completely removed if you want to do this. So what we're going to wind up doing, taking out this white light blue line and this, cutting off this splice right here and running it right out of this 10 gauge wire. This splice right here, this is a resistor wire and this is your main feed line that runs over to your actual distributor. This is a red with white tracer. Mine kind of looks mauve with a gray tracer on it. This goes all the way over to the passenger side, and this splice right here is where there used to be the wire that came out and went to the distributor cap, or the coil cap. I've already clipped that off. And then that splices into, so you have the one line that runs to the distributor, and then you have this other line that runs and wanders all over the place and connects to the eye post on your ignition solenoid, starter solenoid. So that's what all this extra wire is. What we're going to wind up doing is taking out this resistor wire and the red with the white tracer that comes from the other side, all the way up to about here, and then we're going to run a 12 gauge lead braided wire over to here. We're going to connect that directly to the pigtail, the hot line of our distributor, and then we will splice that out again further up the line and connect the resistor wire that runs to the alternator plug and the red with white tracer. I think this is like an 18 gauge wire that runs to the starter solenoid. What we need to be concerned about is this little pigtail. So this is the piece that actually comes with, or I think you actually have to order it extra with your HEI distributor. It just depends on who you buy it from, whether you get this or not. This green line is for your tack. This red line is your hot wire, from your battery, your ignition, the switch line, whatever that may be. And it should be stated on the actual HEI distributor. It says tack and then it says battery. I don't have a tack, so I have no need for this. So before I put this thing on, I'm actually going to take this wire out. So this will truly be a one wire hookup. That should be about it. Took the wire wrap off this thing so I could show you what I was talking about. This is the ICM hookup. So you got your, what used to be light blue wire here, and your 10 gauge red with white tracer. This comes out of the bulkhead, so here we go. Clip that one, and then you can clip it here, right at the splice. Well, essentially this thing's done. You don't need this anymore, so you could just cut this sucker out. So there's this wire. I'm going to keep this just for prosperity's sake, and who knows, someday I might want to wire it back in and go with the computer. Not. Next step is to go through your wire loom. These are the two wires that we have disconnected, cut. Trace this over through your wire loom to the point at where it would have connected to the distributor. Alright, so I've pulled all of the wire, at least for the ignition, from the other side after we clipped it. Took it out of the wire harness. We're going to keep this, and we're going to keep a section of this. I'm going to give myself a couple feet here. That should be more than enough. And then just snip, snip. Neutered! So now we're going to go back over to the bulkhead and we're going to solder the wire in. Going to use some heat shrink wrap, wire wrap. Alright, now that I've got this ready to go, I'm going to go ahead and solder this on. And then do the shrink wrap. Well, it's not the most beautiful thing in the world, but did an okay job. Just to let you know, when you're soldering a 10 gauge wire, that thing is super thick. So
you have to have a lot of patience and a really kind of strong soldering gun or soldering iron, because it's got to get up to temperature to where it'll pull the solder through the wire and connect the two. So that took me a long time, but it pretty solid. I think we're in good shape. Then I put the shrink wrap on it. Then I put some regular waterproof electrical tape, and then I put some wire harness tape over the top of it. So I think it'll hold up. So now I'm going to re-tape the wire harness and put it back into its plastics, or the plastic cover sleeve, and then we'll move over to the other side and connect it to the distributor wire. Alright, we're going to start on the driver's side here. This is coming directly from the bulkhead. You can see right there the white line, or the white wire right there. This used to be the hot wire that ran to the ICM that I cut out. I will trim this all the way back. There's a joint here. See if I can show you right up in here. That in this port there's actually two white wires. The other white wire, well, let me reel that back. These used to be light blue, but with age they've obviously gone to white. So if your wiring harness shows a blue line here, a light blue line here, and a light blue line under here, then it hasn't aged as bad as mine has. Anyways, point is that this other white wire that comes right out of this main hot wire, red with white tracer, this is a 10 gauge wire. This is your main power feed to your ignition. And this is the hot wire connector, light blue line that goes all the way across, and it connects to the S post on your solenoid. This is the light blue wire, that live wire that I was just telling you about, that connects to, this is the S post on your solenoid. This is the I post on your solenoid. This one goes to the starter motor. It's a direct 4 gauge wire. This has a couple different connections to it. This is a direct line right to your battery. So this is a 4 gauge wire that connects up to your battery right there. And then there's also a connection down here, which are these two wires. These are gray. I don't know if you can see that right in there. Right there. Right where my finger's moving. Those, I believe, are fusible link wires, and those go out to the alternator. So that's your configuration with your solenoid. Remember, this is an 84 CJ7 Renegade, and there's no tack on this. So this is the wire configuration for the solenoid. So here is the wiring harness all loomed up, running across. There's the relay. Here's the choke wire that comes out of, or the electric choke wire that comes out of the wire harness. This goes over, down into here. It connects into the neutral safety switch, which is that wire configuration right in the middle, right there. And then it comes out to here. That wire right there is a ground wire that I've run to the cowl. And then the main wire harness that comes down. And around. And then we start getting into the new 12 gauge wire that I have run from the 10 gauge wire coming out of the bulkhead over on the other side of the engine. This is ultimately my new feed line for the distributor. What we took out was this red tracer resistor wire. I have cut this wire out along with 3/4 of the brown wire that was also connected to that splice over on the bulkhead that runs directly to the alternator connecting bracket. That connecting bracket is right here. You can see where that brown wire actually is right there. Some of the Jeep forum guys have talked about What happens with this wire, this actually is the signal wire, kind of the activator wire that comes from the eye post on the solenoid, and all it does is momentarily on startup activates the solenoid. When it's actually in run, this voltage that's running through here drops off significantly, so this wire really doesn't do a whole lot other than kind of forming as an activator. The brown wire, called the exciter wire, what this does is it actually registers and keeps an eye on the voltage feed that comes from the main line to the distributor, and if that drops off and it gets a little bit lower, like as it cycles through the battery and everything, then this indicates to the alternator that it needs to kick in and provide more charge. So that's how I understand it. Anyway, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to splice these two together pretty much exactly the way that they were way back at the bulkhead at the very beginning. And then I'm going to take the new pigtail that I have with, this is a fusible link. Fusible link is pretty much a specialty type wire that has a really super thick insulation to it. And what happens is when the voltage / amperage gets too intense, this thing operates just like one of your fuses, and this will basically burn up. But the thing that it won't do is it doesn't catch on fire and blow everything up and then cause an engine fire. So that's what this thing is. It serves the same purpose as a little plastic fuse, just in wire form. So you can put this in line. So this is what it's going to look like when it's all said and done. That'll be all spliced together, and then this runs up to that single line plug on my HEI distributor. Alright, we've got the eye post wire, we've got the alternator excite wire, and then we got the fusible link that runs up to the distributor pigtail hot wire. One of the things that I had read was that this eye post wire is not needed, but it doesn't hurt to attach it back into this thing, because the only thing that it will do is help provide a better signal. It won't like take away power or provide power, but it's better to at least splice it in here than to just have it hanging out by itself. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a wire splice. These things are kind of cool because they're heat shrunk, so you crimp them both sides, make sure you get a good connection, and then you can use a heat gun. And there's an adhesive on the inside of this thing that, as this thing shrinks, forms a waterproof seal around it. So you get a really good connection. These are copper or tin lined copper pieces, so they'll never rust out, and the oxidation will be held at check, and then they're waterproofed. So this is going to be kind of a nice little connection.
Here's a real quick wire schematic showing you all of the wires labeled and what they are, the gauge of each wire, and what they lead to or what they led from. So hopefully this is a little bit clearer explanation of how I actually hooked up the HEI distributor and soldered in the excite wire from the alternator and the leftover, I guess you could call it, eye post wire from the starter solenoid.
Here's my fusible link that comes out of the wire harness. This is connected to the 12 gauge hot wire. Here's my single line hookup, and that's pretty much about it. Alright, now that we've done all that wiring on the hookup, let's talk about your distributor. One thing to note when you take your old distributor out of your engine, make sure you take the cap off of it, and as you're pulling it up out of the engine block, take note how far the actual rotor rotates, because on all of these distributors you have a gear that connects into the camshaft. This is your camshaft gear, and this is a angled slotted gear. So as you pull it up out of the engine, it's going to have to release off of the camshaft, so it'll rotate, maybe an eighth of a turn. But you want to document that mentally when you pull that out, because that's where you're going to have to position your rotor cap or your rotor back into place. So now let's take this cap off and see what the inside of this one looks like. This one has 4 spring-loaded clips. All you need to do is take either a Phillips head or a flathead screwdriver. Just push in, push down, and rotate around. Just like that. Okay, now that we got all 4 of those pins released, you can easily take the cap off. Also, another thing to note, at least on this one in particular, there's a plastic tab that fits right into a notch on the distributor hub. So when you're putting this back together, you want to make sure that that tab is lined up with the rotor cap. Otherwise, you'll never get this thing to seat right. One thing to note, when you take the cap off of your old distributor, there's 2 things to look for. How much this thing rotates as you pull it up out of the engine block, and also the position of your rotor when you have your engine set to top dead center on the compression cycle. So theoretically, if everything's right, it should be where the number 1 spark plug wire was on your old rotor. Just take note of that, because it'll make it easier for you to actually set it up when you drop this thing back into your engine block. If these things aren't aligning right, meaning that this doesn't sit right down into it nice and easy and everything meshes and then this thing aligns perfectly with the engine block, lightly pull it back out, get a long shafted screwdriver, flathead screwdriver, and rotate the oil pump gear just a little bit, and then try and refit it again. If it doesn't go, then go back in and rotate it a little bit more. But essentially what you want to do is you want to get that oil pump slot aligned up with where the tab is going to be once the camshaft gear engages. One thing that I did notice when I was installing the other HEI distributor on my Jeep was that this one in particular, I don't know if they're all like this, but this one has little grooves that the rotor falls into in accordance to where the spark plug wires are going to be within the cap. So it falls into number 4, number 2, 6, 3, 5, 1. Nice and easy. So that's kind of an easy way to figure out, oh, well, I guess this is the number 1 slot, and then all you have to do is rotate it, advance it a little bit, so that when you put this down into the engine, it falls back into place. And it should, you can almost feel it kind of click as it gets into that groove. So that's a nice little feature, and it kind of helps people like me figure out where this thing's actually supposed to be. Now that you've got your distributor with the cap off in the engine, aligned to the number 1 spark plug, it's well seated. Make sure that you've got your gasket on the rotor shaft in between the engine block and your distributor. I've heard people talk about putting a little bit of oil on these things to help seal them up a little bit. Okay, sounds great. Make sure when you put your distributor cap back on, that when you push these things down, they are all the pins are slotted into the metal slots on the bottom of the distributor. Kind of hard to see, but that's one of those things that you want to make sure you do, because this thing needs to be seated perfectly. And then at that point, let's head up to the garage and see how we've got everything hooked up from there. So this is a little bit of putting the cart before the horse. Don't install your distributor with all of that stuff aligning right until we get your engine set to top dead center on the compression cycle. So now I'm going to show you how to do that so that you can do that before you do that. Just saying, I'm an amateur, still trying to figure this out. Sorry. Appreciate your patience. Okay, so to start this top dead center process, first thing you need to figure out and find is your crankcase timing notches. So I'm going to try and get in here and focus in on it. So what you want to do is you want to look down into your engine case right behind the fan for this little doohickey down here. Kind of looks like a little bit of a port. That's your crankcase cover. You can see the timing notches on that crankcase cover. That's exactly what those things are. You need to get down in there with a flashlight and figure out where 0 is. Okay, see? There's 0. These go in increments of 2. So there's 0. The shorter ones are 2, 6, 10. The longer ones are 0, and then 4, 8, 12, 16. I can do math good. I think it's 20 after that. But anyways, there's a notch on your harmonic balancer that we want to get in alignment with the 0 notch on your crankcase. Alright, so I've zoomed in a little bit tighter, and the harmonic balancer is the thing that's right in the spotlight right now. That is the actual notch that's in the harmonic balancer. There's only one of them. That you need to rotate. What bolt do I rotate? Well, let me show you real quick. Right there, that's your main crankcase bolt. This is the main drive pulley, and their harmonic balancer is right behind that. So what you want to do is just get a socket, rotate that. Bolt is a 3/4 inch socket head to where it aligns perfectly with the 0 mark right there on the crankcase cover. Then you know you're at top dead center. Now here's the little rub there. Every time the engine goes through a cycle, that harmonic balancer notch will align with 0 twice. So depending on what cycle you're on, whether it's the exhaust cycle or the compression cycle, is going to be dependent on using this little fun technique that I discovered or figured out through help with the guys on jeepforum.com. First thing to do, and there's various ways of making this happen, but the one that I found that worked for me, at least I thought was the easiest, was to take off the spark plug, the number 1 spark plug wire, and then take out the number 1 spark plug. Then grab yourself one of these, a rubber glove, just cut off one of the fingers. I cut off the index finger about that far, and then I stuffed this full of tissue paper. Then take that and insert that into the number 1 spark plug hole. Don't put it all the way in, because then you're going to be fishing that out, and I don't even want to think about that. That sounds horrible. But you want to put it in there to where it's got enough of a seal where it's like a cork. Then when you rotate the engine, when you're on the compression cycle, and as soon as you are on the compression cycle, as you rotate that harmonic balancer, this thing will pop out. Mine actually like popped all the way out and left the engine bay. So just keep rotating the harmonic balancer until this thing pops out. Once that pops out, then you want to figure out where the notch is. So climb back up here, take a look, try and find the notch, and then slowly rotate the thing until you got that notch aligned with 0 on your timing case. Do not go backwards. So anyways, once you get that aligned, you got your notch aligned with 0 on there. You know that you're on the compression cycle because this thing's popped out. Put the spark plug back in, and then put the spark plug wire back onto that, and then you can set your rotor on your distributor into the right place. So do this first, and then go and insert your distributor, get all that stuff aligned up that we just talked about. Once you got all your distributor installed, caps back on, you got the thing aligned right, make sure that when you put the clamp back on that holds the distributor down into the engine block, you've got it tight enough to where it doesn't, like, it can't, there's no give, but you also want to be able to rotate it very easily with just a turn of your hand, because that's when you get your timing set and all that other fun stuff. Oh, well, I'm thinking about it. I think I had mentioned this earlier. We hooked this whole thing up with just one wire. I didn't put a relay on this. The one thing that if you are going to do a relay, there's a diode that you can get off of eBay, and what that does is it helps eliminate engine run-on when you turn the thing off. And this diode is really simple. Talk about plug and play. Here's your power wire, your charging wire coming from your alternator, and here's the diode. And this thing simply plugs right into the alternator, just like that. And then this plugs right into your alternator wire that originally plugged into your alternator. So it just makes like a wire extension. What that does is the diode kills the signal so that the motor stops, and it just kind of kills it. It's kind of like a kill switch to a certain degree. It was like $6, so you really can't go wrong there. Whether you're using a relay or not, I'd recommend putting it in there. Since I replaced all the fuel lines on this, and it's been sitting around for a nice long time, I would connect a hand pump on the lead side of your fuel pump, the tube that goes over to the fuel filter, over to the carburetor, and pull fuel all the way up to that point. That way you're not sitting there cranking the engine. I'm assuming that that's what's going to happen, but there's going to be a lot of air all the way in there. So let's get all the fuel into the fuel line as far as we can get it up to the carburetor, so we make, hopefully, the start that easy. All right, let's do it. Here we go. There you have it. HEI distributor installed. Up and running. Perfect. Runs like a watch. Super excited about this. Leave comments. Let me know how well this went for you if you're trying to do this and you're watching this video trying to figure out how to do it. Because when they say it's a one-wire hookup, yeah, it is a one-wire hookup, but there's other stuff you need to do. Hopefully you guys learned some of that in here. I admit this was not my most organized video yet, so apologize for that. Hopefully you got enough out of this to make yours as successful as I think mine went. Last but not least, I do want to give a shout out to all the people that have commented on my channel. It's really awesome to hear that what I'm doing is helping you guys out, because I think we're all in the same boat. We're not really quite sure how we're doing this, but it's actually happening, and that this is actually a decent resource for you. So that makes me happy, makes me proud to do what I'm doing. Let's keep it going.